Welcome to the podcast. This episode is part one of a three-part Christmas special conversation with Mihai Faur, CIO at UiPath, co-hosted by Mark Darbyshire. In this episode, we focus on leadership, not technology hype. We talk about trust, decision authority, risk, and a simple but uncomfortable question. Who decides what AI and agentic systems are actually allowed to do inside an enterprise? Mihai shares how UiPath thinks about human-in-the-loop design, reversible versus irreversible decisions, and why leadership must be willing to publicly defend the decisions automation makes. Let's get into the conversation. Well, it's that time of year when we're encouraged to reflect. And if you work in enterprise technology, to quietly marvel at how we survived yet another year of transformational programs. And honestly, I couldn't have asked a better Christmas present for this podcast than today's conversation. I'm joined by two people I admire greatly. First, I'm delighted to welcome back Mark Darbyshire. Mark has already been a guest on the podcast. And after that episode, it became clear that bringing him back as a co-host was not just a good idea, but something of inevitability. He brings that rare mix of strategic clarity, operational experience, and calm leadership usually earned the hard way. And joining us as guest today is Mihai Faur, CIO at UiPath. Mihai has been at the heart of UiPath's journey through hypergrowth, IPO, and a major SAP transformation, while helping redefine what automation and how agentic AI nowadays mean for modern enterprises. So if you were expecting mince pies and socks for Christmas, I'm afraid we've gone with something far more valuable, a thoughtful conversation about leadership, trust, and the future of work. Mark, Mihai, welcome. It's great to have you both.
Thank you, Nick, for the nice welcome, and thank you for the Christmas gift.
Awesome. Mihai, why don't you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit more about your story and journey at UiPath?
As you mentioned, my name is Mihai Faur. Currently, I'm Chief Information Officer at UiPath. Prior to that, I've been CFO with UiPath. Daniel, almost 10 years ago, I remember it was December, decided to hire me as Chief Financial Officer. Of course, in a very small organization, I think we were like 20 people. The first incorporate, it was me. And at that moment, I didn't realize the magnitude at which this company would get. Because I would say, from a Romanian perspective, if I look back at Romania those days, everyone was dreaming to have a software company listed on the stock exchange, and everyone wanted to be part of this journey. So obviously, I didn't realize, not the weight, but I didn't realize the opportunity at that moment. I'm, of course, blessed, and I think it was an act of God that I kind of met Daniel, and I really like him, and I joined it. So I was the CFO for 4 years. I work as Principal Accounting Officer or Chief Accounting Officer during the IPO process. I took a couple of months after the IPO process because I was really tired after this marathon and sprint. That was the IPO process, which we've done it during interesting times, the pandemic times. Everything was done virtually. It's possible to go public even if you don't meet your counselors, you don't meet your colleagues, and you actually meet them when you have to ring the bell. But nevertheless, after that, I came back to work, and beginning of 2023, with the SAP partnership, I took over the CIO role, lead this important project, which we finalized this year. As it happens again, a new wave of technology came on the market, which I call the Gen AI or the AI, which is reshaping the way we work. And of course, we started our own internal agentic story.
As a CIO, could you please tell our listeners, stripping away from the labels like RPA, AI, or agents, what fundamental management problems for you specifically does UiPath solve and can help other large enterprises today? And why do you think that problem has become impossible to ignore only now?
It's very difficult to actually ignore these terms because there's a natural evolution from automation to AI to agentic and to AGI in the future. It's like the past cannot be ignored in my perspective. But I would say any automation technology, and I would include here the AI and the agentic automation within the automation framework, because in the end, we are trying to automate something that cannot be automated. Or, and this is probably the real issue that most of the companies have, when you have complex tech stack and you have different applications and your processes are not entirely mapping on those systems, you kind of are facing a couple of decisions, and I see two big roads down ahead. One would be you go and you manually work. around those gaps that exist in the systems, or you go and script and customize those applications. The problem is, in the first one, if you go on it, and you're gonna need people actually to do all those things that the systems are not able to solve for you as a business enterprise. And there are so many examples here, like how do you do your accrual, how do you do your payroll? Not everything sits in the systems, and there's manual work, and the work can be structural. If you go and try to script the systems, then you're gonna end up being a prisoner of those applications and prisoner of certain programming languages, and then prison to certain professional services teams and prison to many things within the IT organizations. How can you be free of this? And of course, I think UiPath proposal back in the day with the RPA was focusing primarily on tackling those manual problems, manual repetitive tasks that existed within these processes. And of course, being structured, we did it very well. I think UiPath gained a lot of traction those years. It was the first kind of AI wave, I would call it. I would call automation, RPA, the first AI wave. And we did. Now with AI, of course, the door is open to other possibilities. Like you can go and tackle unstructured world. You can go and tackle where the humans may reason and make decisions. I think you can put agents for humans instead of humans, and the humans can actually coordinate all of these agents and automations. So the fundamental problem, I would say, for the enterprise is how they can make sure that they're not relying on certain technology, that they can be debt-free, and they can be able to build internally very fast solutions, yeah? In the end, every company has its own way of doing things, its own specific processes, its own tech stack. All of this, I would say, it's like a melting pot, and then there's no such thing as, I apply this technology, going to solve my problem, or I apply these two technologies, and they are going to work very well together and fix my entire process. There's no such way. I think using agnostic technologies, and I'm saying UiPath is one of the agnostic technology in the automation space, makes sense for IT teams and also for business. There is speed in it, there is easy deployment, there is easy maintenance and easy control over all of these automations and agentic automations. It's kind of difficult to ignore, I would say, automation. And if someone can think, and there could be probably many companies didn't adopt automation, but they'll find a easy path to go directly skipping RPA. That's not possible. I mean, automation workflows, the way we know it, it is here to help the agentic to work together with the humans. Yeah, there could not be 1% reliability on the agents, because we know sometimes the outcome could be wrong, and we know the agents could have unpredictable answer, because that's the way AI is built today. I cannot speak for the future, but I'm saying RPA is here to stay for a long term. It's actually enhancing the agentic piece. It's enhancing the AI, and it's actually bringing the agentic and the AI into the enterprise. And AI without automation can really stay in the realm of personal productivity. We all know this. Everyone is using these days OpenAI or Claude or Gemini or other technologies for the daily work. But bringing it into the enterprise world, you need a set of tools like automation, like human in the loop, whether it's an action center or other kind of validation centers, to actually make these business processes work.
Make total sense. Actually, you reminded me of one thing that happened around 5 years ago. So I was flying back from the UiPath Immersion Lab in Bucharest, and I was sitting next to a CFO of a very large corporation. And she asked me, she said, Nick, I have one of the big four company helping me with the SAP transformation journey to build all the processes. They're helping me to define how they're going to look like, how many people we need here and there. Do you think I should think about RPA or UiPath right now, or should I do it later when we already have processes in place and then I'm going to adapt it? And I just want to ask you the same question. Given that we have now the agentic era, should the companies that are going through the transformation think about UiPath or any other technology upfront and have that as a base, foundation for the future transformation? Or should you just, think about that later? And what was your approach there?
Our approach was an ambitious approach. First of all, it was our technology, and we had to prove a good use case of how to run an ERP implementation. It was SAP in this case, but running an ERP implementation, whether that's a greenfield project, which was our case, or brownfield, if you choose to migrate from one on-prem version to cloud version. I would say was an ambitious project because we want to prove the use of our technology. And it was also the second goal that we had in mind was how much should we rely on, ACP programming language ABAP and then go and enrich the standard of the shelf technology with our business logic. So take whatever gap exists in our processes versus what ACP is proposing as off-the-shelf product. And of course, that has a gap. I mean, ACP is doing things or is coordinating you, is telling you how to do things for certain processes versus how we do things now. And what do we want to change? Do we want to change the way we do things, or want to change the way SAP does things and then work as SAP is intended? And of course, we try to do a simplification of our processes, but in the same time, we didn't want to go and become experts in customizing SAP because we didn't have a team prior to this project of, SAP experts. So if you don't have a team of SAP experts, the only thing that you can hear is like, you're going to be dead. You're not going to implement it. You're going to fail. I know so many use cases, so many companies that didn't have the proper teams in place, the experts to run SAP. And I said, like, okay, but what if we look at these systems and then we understand the gaps between what SAP is proposing from a process, what we have, we look at the gaps, we analyze the gaps, and then we decide which technology to choose to actually implement those mitigation plans for the gaps. And so in the end, we are happy with the process. So then we made a very simple decision tree and we analyze case by case all the gaps in the user stories. For example, as a tax accountant, I'm used to download for intercompany transactions. I'm used to download trial balance, run my automation, calculate my intercompany charges, and then just create a journal entry. SAP is proposing you to go and do the calculation, but then you have to go into SAP, raise a purchase order, which turns into an invoice, which turns into a journal entry. And we said, like, we don't want to do those steps. They are necessary. Those steps are, thought by someone that didn't have a different approach. So this is use case where we went and decided on automation, and we built an automation for the intercompany charges. Therefore, we did it in the same way for other gaps, for all these user stories. For SAP, there are a couple of things where we decided to go for scripting SAP. I'll give you the example because it's plain obviously that we did a mistake there. We have for our journal entries a set of approvals. There are two levels. One is the reviewer, one is an approval, and there are like 12 pillars of metrics approvals or matrices of approvals. You have one for payroll, one for tax, one for treasury, and so forth to 12. If you have very complex journal entries with a mix of journal ledger accounts, it might end up that your approvals might go to different persons without someone having a high level view on the entire journal entry. So we couldn't, we cannot use this script that we did it in SAP. And then these days we are winding down this from SAP, and we are building a very simple automation that tracks and with the action center in the middle for the reviewers and for the approvals for the journal entries. And this is on the roadmap for us to build Agentic as well, because in the end, if human is doing a review or if human is doing an approval, why could not the agent do that? Of course, under the supervision of a policy and of the human. So we are down the roadmap now to build some automations, and then as the first case, and then as the second case, the second MVP, Agentic as well for this. So we look at SAP, as I said, as an ambition, but also we try to help ourselves in the way we implemented this project. So our concept of clean core, which is also SAP concept, because we realize having a clean core means faster upgrades, faster versioning of our, cloud applications. And we're talking about a cloud application, which means for them speed and more customers and more happy customers. So we really took very seriously this clean core concept, and we left and we use SAP only to configure SAP, configure certain reports, which now with the Agentic, it's actually, we are going to publish more and more data into data warehouse and run automation and Agentic on top of it. But to satisfy some of the business needs for SOX compliance, we built some reports. And of course, where we saw other SAP configuration was around the APIs. APIs are critical for us to run our integration technology, our API workflows between SAP and non-SAP better, which is another thing that we did. And we had to configure certain APIs using ABAP language, but we keep it to the minimum. And I would say by that, we were really able to be on time with the implementation, and I would say we were more efficient. We didn't spend anything on top of what we agreed, and we went right on the deadline with this go live for SAP project. We also did it for the first time. We did a trade-off. We didn't use Tricentis technology for testing. We use our technology and the old technology, test suite, the old test suite technology. I would say we had some issues at the beginning when we kind of map all the test cases and business cases. That was difficult for us to do. They said now in the new cloud version, problem is kind of sorted out now with the access to AI and the models. Back in the days, last year basically, we spent a lot of time in mapping these processes. Once those processes were mapped in the test suite, we were able to run a lot of test cases to the automation. And actually, I saw the result in the final user acceptance testing, which happened very fast. And it was on time. Usually this is where actually you spend your time and where you are blocked. And, in the last month happens that you delay your project. We didn't delay it. And I think the test suite helps us a lot. And everything that we built from a test perspective is going to help us to the next versioning and upgrade of ACP, which will happen in 2 years. And we are very comfortable with this. I think we can migrate to the new versions within 1-2 months.
That's a great result. Congratulations with that. I
Thank
think
you.
that you mentioned that briefly, that nowadays, coming to this AI era, some of the decisions can be made by AI. If we think about that, maybe if you were to convince somebody skeptical, or maybe you're skeptical, I don't know, as this autonomous systems, AI systems, become more autonomous, how did you decide where decision-making authority should live? And we discussed on the previous podcast with Mark about this SAP journey that there's almost like a triangle with speed, control, accountability. How do you consciously accept those trade-offs?
That's actually a very good and very tough question to answer, to be honest with you. So, we all know automation and agentic, it's allowing us to be more autonomous. Yeah. And we have now, I think at UiPath, close to 50 agentic automation idea. I'm not saying agent, but I'm saying like where agents built on certain models are working together with automation and with the humans in the loop. I think most of them could be some of them that are fully autonomous and making the decisions. I will give you the example of a licensed extension, which actually reads the messages from sellers when it comes to extending a certain end of date of a license, because we're still in negotiation with the customer. So someone needs to go and say I want to extend that license with 10 days or 2 weeks. The agent is making the decision because there's a high level of confidence there, and we are monitoring that. That's kind of the decision where you wouldn't have risk, but you will get speed. Yeah. So when we did this, we didn't start by asking ourselves what automation could decide, but actually which decision, actually the organization UiPath is already comfortable to make them work, to put them into effect. And it's not necessarily the complexity, but the risk. It's always associated with the risk. Yeah. So low risk, for example, easily reversible decisions were delegated fully to automation, like this one, for example, to extend a license for a customer that, but of course, we put some guardrails in place for this automation to work, and then we made sure that this is giving the right results always. This took us a lot of time because we had to work with our product team for this one, but it working very well. Of course, if I think about the high impact or irreversible decision, they will stay with the humans, and I think automation is limited to maybe recommendation again and human in the loop support. For example, we are now evaluating all the finance use cases, all the finance agentic use cases where I think the agentic will actually touch certain SOX control processes. I'll give you the example of contract review. Under the CISO 6, which is the US GAAP standard for software, we have a standard contract on our format or template where we know the revenue is recognized in certain ways. That's very clear. But we also know that we have certain customers template coming from customers, contract template coming from customers, and also some of them are even negotiated. And in those cases, we don't know what happens with certain clauses. The people in revenue recognition, they have to read it. So before that, we had, before this agentic automation that is now in production, we had people reading all the main legal clauses that we know would defer certain revenue recognition. Termination for convenience, it's one of it. Product acceptance is another one. TJ right that, or rights that give a certain liabilities towards customers. Like, for example, they can obtain the best price in the market for a certain SKU. These kind of clauses with the agentic and with a suite of agents, actually reading the context, is able to take all these clauses and create a dashboard. That dashboard becomes now, of course, something that the humans will review. And, if they feel like they're not reliable, then we'll go and do the review threshold. So we don't look at all the contracts. So then there is a human to review, let's say, customers with contracts over $500,000, which even if the agent is doing the work, we want to make sure that we have the humans reviewing them just to see what the agent is doing. So as I said, we go and choose speed over preventing fault in certain low risk areas, but where we feel like we need still to have the humans in the loop to validate, we are still doing that. Before that, in this use case, we only review contracts above $500,000. So now we can look at all of them, and we can even realize $50,000 worth of contracts, what this revenue dashboard would look like. So that's the way we think about this. And I think the punchline or the hard line that I want to say is that no automation was giving the authority to make decision if leadership wouldn't be willingly to defend publicly. And it's something that is on our mind, just so you are aware. It's not something that we take it very easily. And I know the technology is at the beginning, and I got many questions when I met customers in France and in Germany, and so how do you do it if you're not relying? So we always put the human in the loop, always, always, always. Specifically where we believe we talk about high thresholds or sensitive processes and other use cases. And I think we need kind of raise the bar, because I think the leadership these days should be accountable for systemic outcomes and not one-off exceptions. That's where we need to be in the future.
Mihai, I was wondering if I could go back to something you talked about earlier on. You talked quite a lot about the adoption of SAP, and you talked a lot about how we used automations to, either address shortfalls or gaps between what you got out of the box and how, our finance department, for example, wanted to work.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously that led to a very clean core. I'm also interested in, did we see a role for automation in the adoption to SAP, in the migration? So not so much, business automations, but I think what you might call more delivery automations. Did we look at things around, can we, accelerate the data migration, or can we deal with setting up parts of the SAP stack? And I don't know. I don't know if from your perspective you got much insight into that, but it'd be very interesting to hear some of your words around, what we did in order to accelerate the adoption. Could we have applied automation earlier in that fairly complicated journey, and things like that? I'm very interested, obviously, in the SAP migration.
Yeah, besides the change management programs that we ran when we launched such project, we didn't spend too much time in how can we make SAP more easy to be used by our people. But we ran typical training sessions with SAP, and we try to engage them more into how can we use automation and not necessarily spend time within SAP. So we needed them to go and use SAP the way it is, so we can actually find out what we can automate. SAP, it's like, for example, even if you want to approve a very simple role for a certain person, you have to go and click different buttons, and you're going to have like 3-4 windows open until you get to the last window where you have to press a button and approve certain things. I found that very unproductive, and I think I realized what we can automate, and that's why it's giving you a lot of insight into what you can automate now. We, of course, we obviously speed up the time of deployment with the testing, but more than the automation per se that speed up the process, we didn't think about, much about the user interaction with SAP. It's something on our mind these days where we go and see like what people are doing, how they interact with the systems, and see how many of those things we actually have to automate. Think about it. Most of our processes are actually system generated. There's a bunch of automation on top of it, which we are running, like intercompany, payroll, accruals, recognition, a lot of them. There's still a lot of work that people are doing by interacting with SAP, and that's where we want to tackle from an agentic perspective. We also had to realize we made some decisions. For example, when we decided to drop on automation that was doing cash application, meaning where you take your bank statements and you are looking for your transactions or cash received from customers and trying to apply them into your necessary to clear your account receivable balances. We heard SAP is good, is doing 80% of them. They have their own module and you can do it. Actually, we realized when we integrated the banks that electronic bank statements went there, but the matching was not 80%, it was only 60%. And we realized that after we went live. So now, from a user experience, we are building an agentic solution that is going to tackle the rest of the 40% of the cash that we receive from customers that are not always one-on-one. I mean, one customer, an invoice, it matches. It's very simple. You have so many use cases where customers might overpay you, might underpay you, might not even appear as a name on the bank remittance. Maybe the invoices are not there. So here it's where I think agentic comes very well into picture, yeah? And we build a lot of use cases. We know all of this from our practice, and we are building an agentic on top of this. So I would say we are going to agentify the CRP. We are going to now shift from implementing SAP using UiPath to actually running SAP using UiPath. And I think agentic is giving us this opportunity.
Thank you. Back to you, Nick.
As we wrap it up, I want to thank you, Mihai,
Thanks
for sharing not just the transformation, but the thinking, trade-offs, leadership behind it. Conversation like this, I believe, a reminder that real change is really about technology alone. It's about judgment, trust, and people. Thank you to Mark Darbyshire for co-hosting today's conversation and for bringing clarity, perspective, and just the right amount of healthy challenge to this conversation. And finally, thank everyone who's listening, whether you're leading transformation, living through one, or quietly recovering from one. We really appreciate you spending time with us. That wraps up part one of our conversation with Mihai Faur. In the next episode, we move from leadership principles to execution, how those ideas shaped UiPath's automation-first SAP transformation, including clean core decisions and some hard trade-offs along the way. Join us for episode 2. I'm your host, Nick Kabanov. If this conversation sparked any thoughts or questions, we'd love to hear them. Share your perspective and make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the series.